Alright guys, welcome back to another video. So in this one we're going to be starting a brand new project, building a dresser slash changing table for my sister. So she's currently expecting sometime in August, which is great for me because my birthday is also in August, so I get to share a birthday month with my niece or nephew, whatever it ends up being. And so I'm really excited to build this for their nursery. And so I need to try and get this thing done in a timely fashion here because I think that my sister and her husband would kind of like to get this thing in the nursery sooner rather than later. And so the goal with this project is just to build something that is going to be durable and is going to last a long time. And so we're going to be building this dresser out of maple. Now maple is a wood that I don't generally work with. You know, I tend to stick to cherry, white oak, and walnut for most of the furniture that I build. But my sister requested maple, so I'm going to make it happen. Now one of the things that I like about maple is its hardness. It's actually a little bit harder than white oak, but it's also a closed grain wood, so unlike white oak, it's very generally easy to work with. It hand planes really nicely, and you can just get a really good finish over it. One of the downsides to maple, in my personal opinion, is the color. But again, like I said, my sister likes the color of it, so just different opinions. I generally like darker furniture, whereas maple is a very light colored wood. And so I know you guys are probably thinking it seems like a waste of time to go through the effort to make a beautiful piece of furniture that's going to be used as a changing table, because it's going to get covered in all kinds of baby excrements. And so I'm not too worried about that. Again, my sister showed me the changing pad that they got. It's a very enclosed pad, and I'm sure that the baby's going to spray everywhere anyway. But the goal here is to make something that, again, is easy to refinish. So we're going to be using the same tried and true oils that I've used on all my other projects. So it's easy to refinish. And it's a closed grain wood, so none of that gross stuff is actually going to work its way into the wood. So I've went through and I've made sure to plan this out really well to make sure that we have as little problems as possible in the future, and this thing does not have to be burnt when it's done being used. And so I am going to be going, hardcore traditional joinery on this. We're going to be using nice dovetails for the drawers, all Morse and tenon joinery for the frame and structure. The only area we're going to be getting a little bit modern with it is going to be with the drawer slides. We're not going to be using like mechanical drawer slides like ball bearing ones, but we are going to be attaching them with screws, so I'll show you guys when we get there. Same with the back panel like we did on the pie cupboard. We're going to be attaching that with screws as well, just because it's the easiest way to attach it. But anyway, the first step we have to do here is go in and break down all of our lumber, sketch out all our pieces, break it all down to the side and the rough sizes, and get into the milling process. So we're just going to jump right on into that and get going with it. So I've already gone through 3D modeled this thing out. I've got a full detailed cut list here. And so I explained this in the first video of the pie cupboard project about how you should always, before every project, go through and either 3D model it, sketch it out, and then figure out your cut list. The cut list is probably the single most important thing I found for whatever kind of woodworking project you're doing, whether it's DIY or fine furniture like I'm doing here. Having a cut list really just makes the process more enjoyable because you just cut out these pieces and then they work. They just all work and fit your thing. Whereas if you try to cut each individual piece just going off your diagram or going off your model, you can sometimes mess that up. You misread, whatever. It's much harder. Whereas here, again, it's very easy to just go through and lay out your pieces. And I got caught for this in the last video. I'm going to be doing the same thing where I'm going to be putting a letter beside each of these. And there, for correction to that video, there are 26 letters in our English alphabet. So luckily I don't have more than 26 pieces here, but I just thought I should correct that because I got caught for saying that in the milling video for the last project. So thank you to the two of you who called that out. I have now educated myself on the number of letters in the English alphabet. All right, so I've got all the pieces roughly sketched out on here. I went through, broke it down, and just marked lines and marked where all my pieces are going, and figured out a rough board footage of what this is already going to be, or what I'm going to be using in this. And so the total project overall, when I calculated it out, following my cut sheet here, the exact board footage that's going to be in the final physical piece is about 32.5 board feet. So that's not a whole lot of board footage. Again, this is a dresser. So the best way to think about a dresser is it's basically a 2-inch thick box all the way around, because that's just generally how it works, because you're working with so much material, and that's just how it comes out to. And so in this stack here, and what we're going to be cutting out and stuff that's not considered waste, we have about 42.5 board feet. And so this isn't even all that we're going to be cutting out. I still have a decent amount of material in the drawer bottoms. That's going to be a lot of board footage to make up the bottom of the drawers, as well as the side panels of this thing. I still have to decide what I want to do with them. I'm still waiting to hear back from my sister whether or not she wants to go with a different wood or something. But I'm planning to go with maple, but I'm just going to wait and see if she wants to go with like cherry or walnut or something a little bit more fancy. So we're just going to wait and see on that one. And so yeah, it does add up very quickly. And within this whole pile, there's a mixture of a little bit of waste. So I think we have about 5 board feet of wasted wood, which just means that it's too short, or it's stuff like around this knot that's just wood that's not going to be able to be usable. You just can't use it because it's just too rough. And there's also sections where I made sure to leave them, at least 15 inches long, so I can use them in the future for other projects. So there's a lot of those sections mixed in here too. And so I've mentioned this in every video where I talk about milling. What you want to do once you've laid it out like this, you've got all your pencil marks on your boards, you want to just go through and double and triple check it against your cut list to make sure that you can actually get the pieces that you planned out of here according to your cut list. So I made this mistake on our last project, the pie cupboard, because a lot of my pieces, when I left them, either I didn't think about the length and having to joint them, and over that length there being a little bit of cupping or bowing. So in this time I've actually made sure to think about that properly and go through the process. Now what's most important is that you can actually get the width that you're looking for. So a perfect example of this is this piece I've got in front of me here, which is for our top drawer side. And so what I need to go through here and make sure of is that I can actually get my 4 3/4 inch tall sides out of this piece. Now the reason there's a question about that is because we've got this big check down the front edge of the board here that is going to be very problematic if my drawers can't actually get all the way up there. Now again, you want to make sure anytime you're looking at these defects, you're looking at the side where the defect is most prevalent, most visible. And so if it's something like a check at the top of the board, you want to make sure that you're looking at the side where the crack looks like it's going down the furthest. If it's something like this, I can see which, if I was looking at the other side of this board, it looks perfectly clean and clear, whereas this side definitely has some issues. So the best way to do this is just to quickly measure it. And so I can clearly get 5 inches out of this board. No issue. All the way down, all the way through the whole length of where this check exists. And so I know I'll very easily be able to get my 4 3/4 inch board that I need out of this section. So when you're making pieces specifically for lag stock, you want to start by cutting off the very end of your 8/4 chunk. And so what we're looking for in the end grain here is nice diagonal grain patterns. So you can see generally it's on your outer corners where the grain starts to curve around and it's coming in at a diagonal through there. And so that's what you want for your lag stock. Now 9 times out of 10, this is going to be really easy to find. And when you're looking for lag stock, generally narrower pieces are going to yield more lag stock, because the narrower the pieces, the sharper this curve is, the more riffs on stock you can get out of it. Or not riffs. Yeah, I think riffs on is actually the right word for that. And so the main reason for using areas where the grain is going diagonal, there's kind of two things. One, it looks a lot better. You get a lot more consistent straight grain down all 4 faces of the leg, which is really good. But it also helps minimize wood movement. Because the grains are going diagonal through it, wood movement is basically equal on all 4 sides, which basically negates the wood movement. Compared to if you were to use a section like in the middle of this board, then your wood movement is going to be going in and out like that. So if you have your tenons and that, all your structural pieces connect to that area, it's going to be a lot more movement compared to somewhere on the end like this. All right, so I've got the leg stock all perfectly squared up, laid out, and I know exactly which pieces are going to be which now. And so in the process of squaring these up and preparing them to become the actual components of this dresser, you guys saw me use two different methods for actually doing the thicknessing of them. And so the first step in anything is always starting on the jointer, making sure that we have two faces that are perfectly perpendicular at 90 degrees, or at least they are close enough to 90 degrees for our other methods to fix. And so then from there, the first method I'd used was on the planer. So to get these down to their thickness, I went through the planer and just did a bunch of small passes until I got down to the thickness that I wanted, which was just past our kind of defects areas. And so to do the other face, you guys saw me use the table saw. Now both of these methods actually work really well. The planer is a little bit cleaner, a little bit safer in general because you don't have the spinning blade. It's just a little bit overall. It would be the more advised choice if you're a newer woodworker. But the table saw is what I prefer, just because it helps you correct some errors. And it is just a little bit easier to work with, in my opinion. So one of the main benefits of the planer is that it perfectly references your jointed face. So if this is your jointed face, the planer is going to cut referencing that face to make this face perfectly parallel to it. That's exactly what you want when you're trying to thickness a piece or get it to a specific size. Whereas on the table saw, there is some chance of error. Your fence can tilt out, again, depending on the quality of table saw you have. If your fence is extremely short, like on a job site saw, that can create some error. Or if your table saw fence is not super secure and tilts outwards or veers outwards, that can also create some error. That makes it less accurate than a planer. Now, one of the reasons I like the table saw more for doing this is because it lets you correct some of your mistakes. Because what the table saw does is it references this one face against the fence, but also references this other face against the bottom of the table. So it's much easier to get this other face to a perfect 90 degrees, because it's much easier to set a table saw blade to perfect 90 degrees than it is to set a jointer fence to perfectly be 90 degrees. So I know that as long as this face is flat and at least somewhat true to this other face that would be done on the jointer, then when I rip this face on the table saw, I know that this face is going to be perfectly 90 degrees to this face. Then all I have to do is spin it around, rip the opposite face again on the table saw, just taking off very small amounts. We're talking like 1/16th to a 32nd of an inch. And that will give me two perfectly 90 degree faces. And again, much easier to get those two 90 degree faces compared to getting them on a jointer. And so the last step on these was to cut them to their final lengths of 35¼ inches. So I went with 35¼ inches because I want this thing to be 36 inches overall height. And so when we add a 3/4 inch tabletop on it, that equals our 36 inches. And so to do the cross cutting, I left the 24 tooth ripping blade in there because when you're dealing with thick stock like this, and especially maple, which is a closed grain wood, which doesn't tear out very much even when you're using a 24 tooth blade, it just makes it a lot easier to do the cross cutting. It makes clearing out the dust again, because it has those big spaces, it clears out the dust and all that much easier and much cleaner. And again, with the hardness of the wood, that's always a benefit. So these pieces are all prepped and ready to have the mortises cut into them. So there's going to be a lot of mortise cutting in these parts, and it's going to take me a good day or two to get these all in here because I'm probably going to have to sharpen the bit multiple times during the process because, again, hard maple, and it's just a lot of mortises in general. And so when you're laying out your mortises, you want to make sure that you're laying them out accurately. So the best way to do that is to not use a tape measure wherever possible. Again, somewhere like in the middle of our legs, we may have to use a tape measure to get to those accurate lengths because I don't have anything else long enough to do that. But wherever possible, you want to try and use a combo square because this can be set at a specific depth, and then you can accurately either put a knife line or a pencil line, whatever you prefer. Marking gauges also work really well, but again, you're limited extremely by the length of these things. So wherever possible, use combination squares, use marking gauges, but again, make sure if you are going to use a tape measure to just double check before you make any marks with your knife or pencil, to just double check that the measurement that you're looking at here is the same measurement. Also, you want to make sure that you're referencing off the same spot. So if I'm measuring down for a mortise right in the middle of this leg, and I'm deciding I'm measuring from the top down to that distance, I want to make sure on all of the legs I measure down from the top to get that distance. I don't try and figure out the opposite end of the mortise and then measure in from the bottom because that's just not going to be accurate enough for what we need here. And so for all the mortises in here, I'm going to be using a 1/4 inch mortising bit in my mortiser because, again, I have a mortiser and it's going to make life a lot easier. If you wanted to, you could do all of this with a router jig. I've shown this in other videos where I used a router to cut mortises in both 3/4 and 8/4 stock. It's a very easy way to work. It does work, it's very functional, but I just don't enjoy doing it. That's why I put money into a mortiser, which again, I have a mortiser now and I'm really excited to use it.